so on. But but we have now the liberty of going beyond that. And so I think it's something that I saw almost everywhere, even in cities that have large, and established historical heritage, like could be Paris or London or other things. In fact, when you change the scale of observation and reflection, everything changes. The heritage, the meaning of heritage, even its function in the society, is completely changed. So what we are saying here is that in order to really capture this emerging trends and perhaps even be useful for policymakers and in a way all those who want to have a future look approach, a future look on heritage, on the role of heritage, we need to establish an approach. We call it an approach because it's very sort of flexible, as you can imagine, as an attitude that somehow breaks the traditional barriers and perhaps finds new ones. Maybe we haven't found the new ones, the new definitions, the new visions, and so on. But certainly we have opened the way. We made some example here. I think Michael put down some titles just to remind us of what we mean. Like, first, of course, the cultural nature relationship is fundamental in the metropolitan context, as we have seen in many cases. The tangible, intangible, also the same, and the key issue of try to understand the role of heritage in the new identities, social fabric of the metropolis is not. Seems it's very complex. So it's changing. It's a transitional identity. So we have to somehow find ways of representing, understanding all this. Of course, this brings with it a number of other things which have to do with the policies, the frameworks, the interpreters, the way in which you actually narrate all these things. So, but this is the work to do. So I think that what we are saying here is, in a nutshell, we are out of the box already. We don't need to ask ourselves to go out of the box. We're out of the box, and we are in an uncharted territory, which is, I think, an interesting position because we can explore and find new ways. Perhaps we have to take multiple approaches because the situations are very different from each other to the other. But certainly, we want to establish something that is new, innovative, and very much say linked to a new way of policy making that involves the metropolitan context and culture. That is the in a nutshell that point A. Thank you.
So I think that just to put it into the format is that it does mean to say that our report is not going to be a report, more likely to be a roadmap based on the knowledge and the reporting, and also that we would also try to look at 2B is that to reach these innovative and new ideas, we would like to look at perhaps dedicated fields of particular subjects which are actually coming on the to the table. So let's open up. We want to then add to these this information. I think that we're looking at how the challenges of which we're facing in the next 10 years, let's talk about the decade of action, needs then new ways of thinking. And these, we believe that the metropolis has got a potential for providing these new ways of thinking. So perhaps anybody would like to kick off and add something to the pot here, as they say in South Africa, Isivabana. So some other parts. Joe, can I invite you, because you weren't at the discussion and you've got a lot to say about bringing health onto the interdisciplinarity.
Well, again, I'm sorry I wasn't in person in Seoul. It was, I think, 3 o'clock in the morning. But I did do a sort of 8-minute video kind of introducing the way in which public health people are looking at cities and the governance of cities to get a better health result from decisions that are being made in other sectors, and it's very definitionally interdisciplinary. So I just since I'm supposed to sort of insert the health dimension of this, we're very focused on governance of cities for health by decisions being made outside the healthcare sector. And that's developed really, I would say, in the last, conceptually and strongly in the last 4 or 5 years. I think Remy's unit at UN Habitat is an example of a governance unit looking at multiple sectors and trying to see where decisions could be made positively or negatively. For example, I mean, and the evidence base, really thanks to Michael Marmot back at the Determinants of Health Commission of WHO, probably 15 years ago now, really emphasizing the built-in natural environment within cities and how important it is, and also community engagement. So all the themes that you all are talking about are very much a part of the health conversation in cities, and pulling it all together in terms of the importance of political leadership for health certainly at the mayoral level. The other thing I'd say is that for most of the countries on this call, Milan is a good example. There are examples of good practice in health in all policies, is what we're calling it, management in cities around the world. There are networks of mayors working on pollution. There are networks of mayors working on built environment and green buildings, et cetera, et cetera. So I won't go on any further, but just to say that the health concern is hopefully not in a corner, but it's sort of laced through, can be laced through all the conversations. It is not now necessarily front of mind in political conversations about cities or others, but functionally decisions being made every day in other sectors really promote health or are problematic for health. So it's pretty, what you get, I mean, I'm a doctor, I'm a pediatrician, but out of the medical clinical field, people are really thinking about things very broadly in these broader determinants. So none of what you all, I don't know in depth what you all are talking about, but I think everything anybody raises, there's a health dimension that people are concerned about, and it's very exciting potentially to try to insert that in appropriate ways.
Antonella.
And for me, the problem is really to be focused on the metropolitan dimension and not overlap some research with the traditional planning and urban dimension. So we have to be very, very focused in the points. So for example, for me, what is lacking is so again, it's not an abstract thought, the metropolitan discipline complexity approach. We have to really start to have key studies because, for example, until now, until probably Rio de Janeiro and Buenos Aires, we didn't really touch, not the problem of a metropolitan city, but cities that are in explosion. I really think that what this team should provide for the society is a guideline for the cities, in particular in Africa, Latin America, Far East, that are not properly metropolis until now, but are exploding city. And so to be able to give some design guidance and policy tools, starting from the idea of what can I learn from the past in terms of sustainability and the past resilience? Because after the Industrial Revolution, something is changing. And so we don't know, we cannot use a traditional governance approach related to economy that we use in our continent. We have to use something new. And the metropolitan approach to complexity and the new tool that we can figure out to describe what does it mean a resilience territory, for me is fundamental. So key studies, tools for analysis. And what I learned from the Seoul Congress is that the struggle between great narrative and small narrative. I think that what New York told us about the relevance of illegal narrative that constitute the soul of the city is important. In particular, for example, all the world, Latin American world and African world that again deal with cosmogony. How is it possible that art value and is a heritage has value in the way in which they manage the territory? How I can combine the metropolitan project with cosmogony? For me, it's a problem. And I don't know how to reintroduce that otros saberes into our traditional way to govern and to build the metropolis. That for me is important.
Can I ask Valentina, are you with us? One of the things that we put into the discussion is dedicated fields. In other words, that perhaps we could actually, within the type of the metropolis, these tools that Antonella spoke about, look at mapping as one of the dedicated fields, or something which Ying Jin is speaking about is also modeling. So what are the dedicated fields that you think that we could bring to the table?
That's a matter that we are actually discussing with my colleagues as ours. In particular, we are starting working with Lucia and Xenia too and Adva, considering the possibility to frame our field of action, searching for our case study. So we define some principal guidelines through which we can catch principal keywords that we can connect with open source data that, according to the different scale, can cross together let's say the new vision and new image for metropolitan cartography mapping tool. Is something that require, I think, a time to investigate together. So that could be probably and let's say a starting point for a future research projects, because I think that it's super heavy, I think, as a research field of action, in particular in matter of data mining and data setting according to the same language and the principal keywords that we are going to determining in our research. For instance, what Lucia was discovering through her research has something in common with what Adva and me are going to produce, but of course the language across the 4 metropolitan dimension is different. So one of the topic is to find the same glossary to drive our data mining and data setting phase. So that's, I think, what Professor Contino was thinking about when she spoke about guidelines, that for me are, I don't want to say procedural, but guidelines for projects. So probably we need to figure out how we can search for that in parallel, starting with our research project in practical field of action.
Does Adva or Lucia want to add something to that? No? Okay, so another dedicated field.
Lucia is just typing, Mike.
Sorry?
Lucia is just typing in the chat.
Ah. Okay, so we've all seen, yes. Thank you, Lucia. We know your commitment to Heritopolis.
I have a comment related to Antonella's direction. Can I add to that?
Yeah.
And to that, particularly, I really was identified very closely with what you were saying about the need for being able to encompass different narratives. I think that one of the biggest points of a metropolitan way of looking at heritage is inherent in that we're going to be talking about different identity groups, different narratives, and how we integrate those within the context of a metropolitan area. And we talk about urban development. Generally, people tend to think about it in terms of land development, maybe a little bit on governments, spatial use of spatial functioning. And I think that one of the keys might be in some of the work that was done by Elinor Ostrom on institution building. So if we look at it not just in governance, but we look at more in terms of how communities do institution building and how we create the mechanisms for encompassing different narratives. And because one of the problems is that when narratives are given legitimation, then people tend to think that the solutions of conflicting narratives have to be the same. But I think there was validity in talking about how we can use a metropolitan thinking and way of integration, in which we use recognition of different narratives, but then we have to come up with the institutional mechanisms that will enable us to manage our lives together. So I think that the direction that you're talking about is how to encompass conflicting or different narratives is something that really needs to be given a lot of focus, because it is, as I mentioned, inherent in a metropolitan area as opposed to just a small community.
Thank you. We've taken some points on board. Ying, another dedicated field could be modeling. Do you want to help me on that?
Yeah, and I'm here. Just you can hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, the modeling possibly could help you with some of the complementary data tasks that Valentina have outlined earlier by looking at perhaps the broader global and the socioeconomic and demographic contexts of this work. And what I'm hoping is that colleagues here could find a variety of orthogonal themes that could actually complement each other, so that to show the complexity of the topic. Well, one of the disadvantage of lifting heritage work to the metropolitan level is that everything will be more complex, and therefore perhaps we can decompose this kind of complexity in terms of orthogonal dimensions.
Would that provide us with characteristics, the different characteristics of the various metropolises?
Yeah. So hopefully that could, well, because we'll find something that actually could help you here. Certainly here, there are lots of very accomplished scholars who actually have done work in many different areas, some at the macro level and some at the micro level. And the question is that we should find a way of providing a more global perspective, and within that framework, then people can start to compare their experiences, and also to make the lessons that the people extract from particular case studies more transferable to other cities.
Okay, any questions on that? Any comments? David?
Not specifically on that, but on the things that you've been noting down as we've gone. And I think, you know, the point here, what you've called dedicated fields ? Reflects a discussion that we were having a little bit earlier, that there is so much diversity in the work that is already being reported, and also aspirations within the group, that if we did it all as one large group, there's a strong risk of it becoming too diffuse, fragmented, whatever. And critically, given that one of our key objectives here is to develop innovative perspectives, and crucially to win competitive grant funding to enable us to take this forward in a sort of more systematic and organized way than just all of us operating voluntarily, so to speak, that is really important. And it might well be, whether it's these topics or the three that Eric put into the chat a little bit earlier, or however we ultimately define it, that is a way of giving greater coherence, because getting funding for one or more of these separately is probably going to be a better bet than trying to do one kind of potpourri with everything stewing at the same time. So having said that, I also think, Mike, under A, where you've got interdisciplinarity, and particularly given the importance that we're all agreeing on of engaging non-academic partners, the different national agencies, municipal, metropolitan officials, and so on, transdisciplinarity needs to be there. So inter and transdisciplinarity. Yeah, there where you've got it. And by transdisciplinarity, the way I use it, and most people outside North America do, is it's where academic and other stakeholders work together to it's a participatory or co-productive, co-design sort of frameworks. I think that's also important in terms of broadening the support base, as we've been discussing, engaging and keeping engaged our partners in the various metropolitan authorities, municipal authorities, national agencies, and so on. Let me leave it there. I'll come back on some of the other things
Fabio,
later.
yes. Would you like to make some contribution here?
Yes. One of the issues I believe in the comparison between the different metropolis is, well, during the presentation of the workshop, we have heard very little on what is listed, what is already registered as heritage in the different metropolis. There were some information about the World Heritage only, but nothing on what is national heritage or city heritage, tangible or intangible. For instance, in Buenos Aires, intangible heritage is represented by tango music. Tango music is in the World Heritage list, and is the music of a city. That's a unique case. It's shared with Uruguay, for instance. So I would say,
not World Heritage, it's the intangible heritage list.
Yes, it's intangible, but at the
You said World Heritage, it's not World Heritage, it's the intangible heritage.
Intangible heritage, but at an international level, isn't it?
International, yes.
Okay. Well, they are in. I would say that well, that is an important issue to compare what is listed, what is already recognized officially or unofficially as heritage in these big metropolises. And the second issue is that, as Antonella has said, the spread and not the consolidation of a metropolis in Latin America, for instance, the arrival of or the big growth of many cities is during the late 19th century and in the first half or during the 20th century. So the heritage, as I mentioned, of modern heritage, that it was named by the World Heritage Center and World Heritage when Francesco was there, is an important part of the heritage of the metropolises.
David, you've got your hand up.
Sorry, yes, I did just want to add one thing, which this discussion thread has flagged to me. We spoke last week and agreed on the importance of addressing conflicted heritage or conflicts over heritage, where within the metropolis and its past, its history and its present, there are different narratives, there are different cultures, some of which are not being treated equally, whether they're indigenous ones that have been marginalized or subsumed altogether. And building on that, I think it's also important as part of the kind of conceptual framing, the curatorial narrative, to use Antonella's term, we problematize the idea of metropolis rather than taking it for granted. As various people have said, it's constructed, it's understood, it's instrumentalized and operationalized in different ways. And I think as part of the framing for grant applications, that's an important dimension. What do we mean? What validity does it have in different contexts? Because we tend to assume that this is now universally accepted and regarded as important. But in many parts of the world where I work, that isn't the case. And certainly heritage in the metropolis, in a sense, is a case that still has to be made. So I think that would also add another sort of critical dimension. And I always sort of think in that context of how attitudes in Singapore have evolved over time. When I went there the first time, the indigenous kampungs, many of the older housing estates, many of the other elements of both material and intangible heritage were literally being torn down or ignored as irrelevant and symbols of a colonial past. And then suddenly the tourist value was appreciated, and certain activists locally were starting to articulate, and suddenly Emerald Hill and more recently Chinatown became conserved, but curated within a very particular sort of pastiche and so on to reflect the official narratives. Kuala Lumpur, the same, and there's some wonderful work that's done on the destruction of the cultural diversity of Kuala Lumpur, for example. So these are the sorts of issues and how they change over time that I think we should take on board, so that we don't just assume something which reviewers or people in different parts of the world may not accept in the way that perhaps we tend to think about.
Thank you for that. I did put in counter mapping, and I know that I got a like from Ana Paula. What about there's some ESRs who haven't spoken, perhaps Jana, Clemency, Hyunjae, there was something that you'd like to add to this, very much more specifically regarding dedicated fields and special issue publication, in fact. So any takers? No, you're still listening.
I do talk a lot about this conflict and about
Danielle, yeah.
Yeah, I do talk a lot in my report about specifically some groups that are underrepresented within the metropolitan area, and how their cultural aspects are not really seen because of the social structure that we live in. And I think it's a very important thing to point out this conflict that we have, because most of our listed heritage that we have here in metropolitan Rio is related to the European colonization. And when we talk about Afro-Brazilian heritage or some minority groups, there are traditional fishermen and also quilombolas, many of Afro-Brazilians, also the indigenous groups. They are really underrepresented or listed only as intangible heritage. And we know that what is intangible is always fading. So it's very important to talk about that, and how can we make a kind of a tool or something to strengthen these groups in the decision-making and everything. I think it's a really nice idea.
Thank you very much. I think all this will come together. This counter mapping, underrepresentation will merge into socioeconomic transformations. We have to sort of like work on this a little bit more. Klaus Petter, you have your hand up.
Yes, thank you for giving me the floor. I was really fascinating about a comment I just heard about metropolis as a heritage, or what is listed in the metropolis. And we got some further comments from now from our ESR from Buenos Aires, or no, it was San Francisco. No, it was not San Francisco. About the underrepresented people, I think. Yeah, thank you. And I think this is very important. So it's about colonial architecture. This is world heritage, and I'm also a member in ICOMOS in the Shared Built Heritage Group, and for a long time. And let's say 10 years ago, it was a problem with the colonial architecture, but the members of this scientific group are always mostly from Europe. Now it's changed, and of course, so it's the shared built heritage was not accepted in the countries because the indigenous people were not accepted. So I think this is the diverse approaches about heritage in metropolis in the world is, I think, something what we have to think of, especially in this aspect which Eric said, the heritage of the metropolis, and all this topic we have. There's always important, as I said in our meeting, the conflicts are. We have to look in the conflicts like. I think our ESR from Tel Aviv, she spoke also about this, and then we have to consider that the metro heritage is always a positive aspects, but in the planning of spaces like metropolis. There are even more problems than in usual cities, and I think we have to look at this too. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Antonella.
Guess that before me it was Frank that would like to speak.
Okay, Frank. So
yeah, okay. I would like to add to the subjects that we're talking about, actually the struggle you see in policy making for spatial planning. Initially, a lot of planners were concerned about the metropolis, and a lot of actions were focused on containing it, whether that resulted in the Green Belt in London or in the Green Heart in the Netherlands. And these policies have a very specific spatial impact. They change landscape, they changed the development and the space of the cities. But now we are more than 50 years down the road when that started. We see that policies has changed. In the Western Europe, it is more a liberal kind of political philosophy that is governing spatial development and social democratic, and you see that these concepts are being let loose and they start to water down, and we could question whether things like the Green Belt or the Green Heart should be considered as heritage objects of a metropolitan nature, and they require protection. In a similar way, we could look at technological systems like a metro system, which is specifically characteristic for metropolitan areas. And they're not a metro station in itself or the entrance to a metro station, but the whole system as such, and the impact on the development of a city.
Thank you for that. I don't know whether Hearts has an analogy to health as well, I'm very concerned about that in the past weeks. Okay, Antonella.
Allora, for me, the question is how we can communicate the need for a metropolitan vision to be able to develop the explosive growing of the city in a cultural way, and not only following the idea of the mainstream governance approach that is GDP economy and the use of the metropolis. So I would like to return back to the idea of counter mapping, and I would like to explain what I try to write in the chat. Usually counter map, in my experience, are related to some activism group and approach, and is figured out by activist approach. And my problem is that if we don't identify which were the values, the previous value, so the heritage of this territory that the new colonialism and the colonialism time erase, it's very difficult to find a shared approach. So it's not possible to map. So first of all, we have to identify which are the value that the metropolitan dimension and the metropolitan project erase. So to find an agreement, and then we are able to map, because to map means, according to what Frank said, we have, first of all, to study the impact of the metropolitan project on the territory. Or as Murat Guvenc said, now there are new ontologies. So which are the new ontology and what's happened to the previous ontology? And that is the reason why we think that the tool is fundamental. But if we don't find the metrics that right now should take together the different vision, the metropolitan need that is a system that allows the places to survive is not so well recognized by the government, first of all, the state, and secondly, by the secondary city that should ask why we need a metropolitan approach, since we are the champion of our heritage.
This was very important. I don't know whether I could ask Ying about whether in fact the urban modeling and the matrix, the need for a matrix to hold together different cities which form the metropolis, whether in fact the urban modeling is going to help us on that. And then perhaps Murat, you haven't spoken, Claire, you're also invited. So, and Joe, if you'd like to come back, you're all welcome.
Okay.
Murat.
Okay, I think the point that Antonella has raised is very important, and it relates to the problem of scale in the representation of space. I am referring to a Greek scholar, Helen Kouklelis, in her book on social geography. She identifies 3 levels. The level of the daily life, where the object-based representation holds true. This is the domain of agriculture, architecture proper. Then we come to the level of, let's say, site plans or city-based representation. But when we reach the level of metropolis, then the object-based representation fails. We need to adopt raster-based or field-based representations. There are models to do that. I think this is a very, very crucial problem that I was planning to attack when we were discussing the data visualization, but this is all I can say for this moment, because I think the point that Antonella raised relates to the problem of scale. The level of metropolis is a level of scale that we are not accustomed to work on. So this is a totally new field, and we have to devise new ways of representing the spatial associations in this realm. Thank you.
Indeed, a metamorphose.
Yeah, exactly.
Is anybody any other contributions? I'm checking the time, so we do have another few more minutes just to wrap up this part. Francesco, do you want to help me to wrap this up and try to give us a direction?
I think we also need Eric, because Eric has given a pathway for structuring the next year's activities. Maybe we should discuss that. I think it's very important that we somehow identify the 3, 4, 5, whatever, lines of work where we want to invest, because that will really allow to group people to, and then of course each one will have its own dynamic, but we can relate to them as focus groups for specific issues or specific angles, at least, of the same issue. So I think it will be. I think we need two things. I mean, in a way, to organize ourselves in this streams of work, and then I think we also need to plan some form of reflection that is perhaps as we said earlier, overarching and involves people that are not necessarily in our own system of thinking. Perhaps we need to involve people from sociology, economics, philosophy, and other things, so that we can also, little by little, build the vision.
Any comments? Eric, can you help me on that?
I think it's not easy. Yes, I just a few points on the discussion. I think that there are keywords I have in mind, which is values and identity, which is truly important on the scale of the metropolis. Policies is very important to deal with. The metropolitan policies regarding heritage, for example, or the effect of planning or metropolitan policies, what it is creating as artifacts. But I think we have the question of the definition of what is the metropolis and what is the value of the metropolis, or what is the heritage is related to what is in fact the metropolis itself. Some of us have in mind that the metropolis is a kind of a large territory, very large municipality with different jurisdiction, something like that. But I'm not sure this is a good definition in the time of digitalization of the society. I don't think this is a territory. So we know that it is bigger than a municipality or a town, but the definition of the metropolis is one of the key question on which we should work on, and to make this in relation with the question of heritage. This is the basis, this basic idea, but I think it is crucial.
Okay, I think it's sometimes it's what we want to do, and some things is what we can do. I would like to throw out the 3 topics which Eric has put onto the ESRs and see which ones might have some interest in it, because it's all very well for us to put out the ideas, but if we're not going to work together on them, we might want to tweak some of the headings and say, okay, well, we can't do 2, but we could do 2 if it was a little bit different, or we could add something to it. I do think that Francesco has said that we do need to create the or as David says, transdisciplinarity. And I think therefore we have to go beyond us as architects and bring on people like Joe and other people with which perhaps in critical studies, that we might be able to bring more poetry and spirit, and perhaps reinvent the tango. Is there anything more? Remy? No, I mean, we want to bring this to the WWOOF in 2022. So we want to bring the Metro Hub there. How are you going to help us to bring this to the WWOOF in Poland? And what should we be doing to present this vision and challenge the existing paradigms in Poland? No, we can't hear you.
Mike, I just wondering that the urban modeling and the regional differences would be under the term of the comparative analysis. So just adding up one more topic after the ERICS 3 different framework, just at the bottom, yeah. Heritage in the metropolitan policies, heritage as a tool, the metropolis as a heritage, and the fourth is the comparative analysis in terms of the geo-regional groups, something like that, yeah. And also the urban modeling should be included in this subject. Comparative analysis, yeah, I mean comparative comparisons or comparative analysis.
Emmy, are you back on?
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Is it a good time to comment? Sorry.
Yes, excellent.
Okay. Well, I was saying there are multiple ways. They just share with us the draft concept note of the WWOOF. We had made some comments internally, but if someone is very much interested, I can share with you, Prof. If you want to, we have inserted some dimensions of metropolitan on the broader concept note, so that it's captured. It's true that's a time that you know, different sessions are organized and things like that. So when that is approved, but it's a long way to go. We have our internal input, but we're going to ask partners and things like that. So I can share with you, Prof, to look through and weave in perhaps more of some of the wording that you lack, with the hope that would you know, be kept at the end. Now, the next step, as someone mentioned that there are already some suggestions to submit some events at WWOOF. So I will be keeping an eye on that if unless someone knows if it is out. I have not checked lately, but this is there will be several events, some in terms of capacity building, some in terms of side events, or you know, sessions. I would suggest that first of all we consider something jointly. So if we are submitting something, we do something collectively. That has more chance of you know, being approved. The second is that we spread our input across all the offer to, because of sharing, because there will be stage events, there will be some side of different types of events or platforms. So we can spread through that. And the third thing we do is that we also have partners. It could be maybe Paris or France who has a stand, and where we can stage some events during a partner event where we can bring the colleagues to talk about. It could be ASOCAP usually has you know, a stand, or UCLG or Metropolis. So we can program some small targeted events during that session. Then the fourth thing that is very important is that if you have some of these messages that are coming through from Seoul, from all our engagements, we can take them and try and distribute ourselves through different sessions, you know, especially the dialogues, which are high level, where we can come up and make a statement or say something during, so that it goes on record. Because in the end, there will be a declaration, there will be a statement by, you know, member states, by stakeholders on what WWOOF have come up with. And if you have not been consistent with messaging through all these channels, it would be a bit challenging. So that would be what I would suggest, that we use our collective wisdom, our collective approach to go to this event in that way.
Could you also, I'd received a question from WITRAP in Shanghai about 2023. Agreed that that's somewhere off, but nevertheless, that's a really big project. How could, what are the sort of options that we might find ourselves being able to participate in?
Okay, maybe I forgot one thing on WOOF, then I will talk about 2023. At WOOF as well, last time, I think Eric was there, we organized a parallel event, you know, where I think was on the global state of Metropolis. So we can also imagine if you can book a hotel space or get a room in on the venue, we can have a dedicated session on that one. So that's another venue that I forgot to mention. Now, on the 2023, we have, I would say three things. But before that, there's this, next year we are having, releasing, some of you may have contributed what we call the quadrennial report. Every 4 years, we have to share the status of the implementation of the new urban agenda. So this had been prepared as well. So on 2023, we have two major events. The UN Habitat Assembly, that will be in May 2023. Then that big event in New York, which is the Year of Cities. As you know, many SDGs have their years where they focus on specific SDGs. So that will be the SDG 11 year, meaning that there will be a series of events happening on that particular SDG. We are currently starting to prepare something for the Secretary General report on the implementation of the new urban agenda and the SDG. So we have started this exercise internally, and of course we try to bring all the good work that you guys are doing into that type of report and link that to the SDG 11. But that remains a kind of co-production, meaning that for some of you, that may land at your desk, so you have to contribute. Either if you are coming from, I don't know, even academia, so you keep an eye on that. I don't know the channel that's used in different countries to seek input. The other channel that some of you might be aware or had come across is this, what we call voluntary national reviews and voluntary local reviews. This is another important vehicle that many countries and local government are using to report on what they are doing. So what you are doing in your country or what we are doing collectively and you are contributing, if you find a way to weave that in, it will be important. Why so? Because these are some of the sources we use to prepare the Secretary General report on the implementation. So something that we can do from this side, but we also need your input and engagement in wherever you are. That may require for some of you to reach out or to branch out a bit more to the ministry in charge of maybe urban affairs in your country to see what is their level of engagement or what is their plan or mechanism they have put in place to contribute to these global events. Just a few words on the Habitat General Assembly. This will be the second.
When is that? When is the Habitat General Assembly?
It's in 2023, May 2023.
Remy, what you were saying about SDG 11, I assume you're talking about the HLPF, the High Level Political Forum review of the SDGs, right?
Yeah, that culminate with that. But the point I was making, David, as you know, is that we all have to prepare the background document, all these things that will lead to that. So that the forum is to discuss and debate and take resolutions on that. So even the great work we are doing on the city report will be also an input to that one, because we'll be looking back from 2015 to see what had happened, progress on that one.
Sure, thanks, understood.
So I was just saying for Habitat 3, this is a very important gathering, but contrary to the World Urban Forum, which is very much a broader stakeholder engagement on urban matters, or the high-level political forum, which is very more political as it alludes to. This one is a member state that actually looks into all these things and take resolutions and recommendations and say, okay, UN Habitat for the next, I don't know, 4 years, this should be your priority. These are the things to work on. And floated the idea that if you have this coalition, you know, getting stronger, getting this issue on the attention of member states, this is where they come up with some resolutions to say, okay, you guys, you have to pay more attention to this particular issue. So it requires that we have build more coalition, we build evidence for that, for member states to be convinced that this is a serious matter that needs to be prioritized and considered for UN Habitat to support, and there's other stakeholders to consider working on that. So that's another avenue, and I'm pretty sure that with this enthusiasm I've seen throughout, is something that could be doable in getting something on in the attention of 196 member states to recognize the importance of metropolitan issues. So I will stop here, Prof.
Thank you, Remy. That was really good. Before I give just the screen to Klaus-Peter, Claire, you haven't spoken. Is there something that you'd like to add?
Not really, except that I'm looking forward to seeing, you know, what came out of the workshop, and then to, yeah, seeing what role I can play in generating some kind of output from that.
I think that on that part, we need to sort of talk to Jay about then the possibility of will there be a written report of the workshop? Is that something that might be a small report, but at least we'll try to take the essence? Jay, could you, or is that a possibility?
Yeah, we collect all of the presentation files from all of you, and also we have the breakout room, the recording, and then the moderator for each breakout room sent us their own mimes.
Right.
So I think that combining all of those materials, we can making a little report about the Seoul workshop. Yeah,
right.
Possibility. Yeah.
That's good. Yeah, I think that we did talk about that. It would be Chatham House rules. In other words, that the breakout rooms would not particularly give particular names, but it would be halfway Chatham House. In other words, there will be the people there, but it will be a general debate. Klaus-Peter, as I would like to wrap up afterwards.
Yeah. I have a question to Remy. At what date do we have to apply for a session at the World Urban Forum in Katowice? Because I think there must be a date. Is it in January or in February?
Someone mentioned that this is happening, that they have opened, but I have to check. Really have to check and get back to you. But when it's open, sometimes they reach out to us to contact partners and, you know, seek contributions. But I'm not sure if this has been released. But allow me to get back to Prof, or to as soon as I get the confirmation that everything is open to collect contributions or applications for events. The other thing is I've seen the Thinker Campus also happening in some parts of the world. There was a request for application. Any of you has seen that?
I think Eric has seen it. No.
Okay.
And me too.
The application was for
today, if we want. But there is a round every 6 months, so there is no matter. We can apply for the next round. So this is not a problem. For the UTC, for the WOOF events, it's not already open. I just received yesterday for HBF the draft paper to present the 6 dialogues, and in which there is nothing on metropolitan issues and nothing on culture and heritage. And I will have, so I sent some suggestion, and I hope the Metro Hub could make something to push this, the metropolitan agenda, in this these dialogues. It will be very useful. Thank you.
So, thank you. And so Remy will send me the information. I will attach that to the minutes. Klaus Petter, is that answers the question for you?
Yes, as far as he could answer, okay. And I think it's not a problem for us to have a session there. My experience in the last World Urban Forum fora, it was like this, and also on UN Habitat 3 in Quito. I think, and even Eric now stated that these topics, metropolitan issues and culture and heritage, are not in the meetings. I think it will be possible, and perhaps the metropolitan government could be the organizer. Why not, as a partner? Thank you.
I do have just a personal question to Ying about how would he answer Antonella's idea of a matrix? Is there something that we could do something together with that, or it's not relevant?
Well, I think it would be very good to do a multidimensional matrix. Yes, absolutely. So, and some of the dimensions are not measurable, and I agree.
I love the unmeasurable.
Well, because we will just have to accept that is a fact, so that some will be done quantitatively and some will be done qualitatively. But the idea of a matrix might actually suit the profile of this group, which is hugely transdisciplinary. So I agree with all that. So it would be actually quite good for colleagues to propose different dimensions of the matrix. So it's not just a kind of also one horizontal, one vertical, but actually it could have a depth as well, potentially, if there is a need. I'm not sure what Antonella was thinking of this idea.
I think that's room for discussion. The last 2 points I would just like to spend the last minutes is the reporting and funding. These are the 2 points which I think are really critical. Incidentally, about measurements, I did appear once at the World Heritage Committee when I was on the committee. I don't think that, in fact, that we could go back and have the poetry or the sonnet of Wordsworth on Westminster Bridge with a lot of the activities which are happening now. So I don't know whether, in fact, we could measure the spirit of the metropolis. Anyway, some challenge. I think, David, could you just very quickly say what you'd like us to, what can we do, and how is this going to move us forward?
Well, I think the gist of our discussion is that there are several things that are going to have to happen in parallel or simultaneously, perhaps would be a more accurate word. The key one in terms of following up from last week's workshop is trying to stick to the timetable that you and I put out to everybody on Monday in the email. The suggested milestones. Of the people who've responded, almost everybody has said yes, that will be possible, at least to get the individual sort of city metro reports and the answers to those additional 8 questions finalized by the end of December. 1 or 2 said they'd need probably the first week of January. one or two still have to get back to us. So that would be really helpful, because we need to get that under our belts before we can actually start to structure the document that you're now calling the roadmap. And we want to get that done and a bit of peer reviewing and start to draft the sort of more conceptual curatorial narrative during January. But we need the basic building blocks, which are those city reports and the answers to that. As some have seen, Jay has already circulated the matrix of some of the key variables that he collated separately, and which will very much help us to build the sort of statistical, if you like, database, so that we know what we're comparing. And then the timetable next step is by the end of March to have a draft comparative text, which we can then review. Obviously, everybody will get a chance to look at it, to get a draft of that draft final version by the end of April as the basis for working up how we disseminate it, and also precisely how we present and represent it at the WWOOF and so on. But there is also another opportunity which sits perfectly with that timetable as it happens, and that is on the 29th to the 31st of March, there is an online conference, if you like, called the Nature of Cities Festival, which is organized by an old friend and colleague of mine in New York, Dave Maddox, who runs the Nature of Cities as a sort of NGO. And the first one was face-to-face in Paris in 2019. Last year, we had an online one because of COVID, and this year's one, or next year's one, 2022, will again be on that. He's very keen to have something from us in the format that is called Dialogues. I'll put the URL there, and basically 3 or 4 of us would run a threaded discussion debating the relevant elements of this, and we can discuss exactly what they should be, because by the end of this month, I have to submit an abstract. But that would be a really nice way to invite participation from everybody in this meeting, and indeed people from around the world who call in to get different perspectives on exactly these issues about what we mean by metropolis and heritage, how we might take it forward, invite other innovative perspectives and so on. So that would be there, and that would be a really nice opportunity. It's informal. It's a 90-minute session. I can explain a bit more because I've done them in the previous 2 events. But then building forward in that way, and I think in parallel, and this is where maybe our sort of coordinating group needs to think a little bit more, is how we operationalize these parallel working groups, the thematic ones, develop ideas into potentially fundable proposals, so on. So that needs to start happening, let's be realistic and say after New Year in January, in parallel with the timetable for the sort of roadmap and so on.
Just let me just go back one point in that special issue publication. I'm seeing on the screen Jana, Clemency, Danielle, and everybody, as that I know that Frank had suggested that he would be interested in considering the possibility of a special issue publication. He is editor of peer-reviewed journals, but therefore I've just dial this in and put it on your radar screen, and we might want to think about this at any particular time. It might be a function of the dedicated fields rather than having something general, but within the ESR group, make some comments and reactions on that, and would be very happy to put that forward. The last point is then funding, and that is we really have to know where we're going if we want to get funding. There's no point in just simply raising a balloon and having the money coming out of heaven, even though that it might be sort of a Christmas period. I think that we need to be much more focused, and there's lots of opportunities. We'd indicated National Research Council's bilateral options on Horizon Europe for those of us which are within Europe or associated countries. And other foundations, Joe did mention to me about possibility about the Ford Foundation, UN regional commissions are also funding. So I think that if there's anybody who would like something which we could follow up on, do let me know. Antonella.
Allora, my focus is that we have to found the young researcher, otherwise we are stuck. So from the side of the European community, we have two possibilities. The first one that is much more related to PhD grant and sorry, Marie Curie, yes, or some other grant that are not so complicated, probably, that are Erasmus Plus. So, or Erasmus Plus, or yes, some bids that are not exactly Marie Curie, but allow us to produce a course, a master course on this topic, because I do think that we are inside of the idea of metropolitan discipline, and probably also to be able to frame a sort of imperfect theory for this topic should be a direction, using the PhD as teacher, for example, so they have to train themselves to produce this course. And that should be a hybrid course, so 6 months in the academy, turning around, and 6 months in a municipality or in some civil society or institution place. And that is one opportunity. The other is instead to create a sort of PhD course. So we have to find a strong university with a strong PhD course that should host, and that should be interesting because all the PhD, even though if they are not European, should participate to this grant. And the third hypothesis, as you wrote, is the Horizon 2020. That is very heavy because the fund is much more related to policy and probably the production of that guideline and some software. In our case, that should be the possibility to implement our tool. So that is something that I'm thinking about regarding the funding. I'm working on that 3 direction.
Okay, thank you. There is a series of culture calls between January and April of Horizon Europe, and I'm sure that there'll be some interesting ones there which we might find the possibilities of joining on. Okay, Eric, have I missed something out?
I think it is perfect. Thank you very much, Mike.
Yes, thank you.
Francesco.
No, okay. Thank you very much. I think it's clear.
And Jay.
Yeah, I'm happy about it. Okay.
Okay.
Right. Yes.
Okay, so we just move ourselves into the next year. A real healthy year post-COVID.
Good luck.
Post, I don't know.
Post-variant Delta, but into variant Omicron.
We are, perhaps we should then try to work out that either that we actually could all meet in the WUF in Katowice. That would be really something quite special if we could then organize for ourselves an event which, based on that, which we could actually put together. So I think that we should give that some thought as well.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's it. Thanks to all the new people who joined. Thanks, Remy, for the big support. And everybody here.
All right. Thank you, guys.
Thank you all.
Have
Thanks,
a good
Mike.
end of the year. Merry Christmas. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Yeah, Merry
Good
Christmas.
Passover
Thank you.
to everybody.
Bye. Bye-bye.
Good
Bye
year.
bye. Merry Christmas and a very happy
Bye.
New Year. Bye bye.
Happy New Year to all.
Bye.
Have a good holiday.
You
Have a
too.
good holiday. Yeah.
Yeah, cheers. Bye.
Bye.
Francesco. Francesco.